Hello, my brothers and sisters, and welcome to another episode of Off the Beaten Path, the paranormal show where we look at paranormal events throughout history as well as modern day times. As always, I'm your host, Rev.hagen, and I want to start off the same way we start off every show with welcoming the listeners at dngnradio.com, the Dungeon Radio. I've just got to make a quick plug for this because I've been talking with the other DJs on the show. We kind of have our own little chat forum going on right now. And these are some of the most creative, twisted, hilarious individuals I have ever met. And that's saying a lot because 99% of my friends are twisted and strange individuals. These people are not strange. They are awesome. They are from the heart. They love all things horror as well as I do. I'm also the paranormal guy, of course. They've got two different paranormal shows on, ours, somebody else's. They're playing music. They're reading stories. All I can say is there's very exciting things happening right now on dngnradio.com, on Dungeon Radio. And the future is phenomenal. The stuff that we're going to be doing and the way we're going to be changing online radio, and I think radio period, are really going to surprise some people. This is, like I said, fantastic group of people. Couldn't ask for better management, if I'm being honest. Very supportive. So welcome, listeners, at dngnradio.com. Now, today's episode is on something I've just called travelers, because I don't want to call them time travelers, because we don't know. I don't want to call them dimension travelers, because we don't know. But these are a few cases of people that just appeared out of nowhere. Now, I was going to stick to one incident, but the more I looked at this, the crazier, and the list just kept growing of these. Some of them are more modern day, right? So they're easier to check for sure. And some of these are more folklore, which I'll get into in a minute too. My feelings on that, even that term folklore, when it comes to a supposed historical event. But we're going to jump right into it right now. And forgive the new weird lighting I got going on here. I'm trying this. I'm trying my iPad here for my notes so I don't have to be like, so I said to the guy. Trying to make things go a little more smoothly here. But I digress. Let's get into this right now. For lack of a better term, travelers. We're going to start off with a story apparently it's kind of famous, but I didn't hear about it until I started doing this research. It's called The Green Children. Okay, basically during the Middle Ages, what happened was these two children, a brother and sister, spontaneously appeared in a village, small village in England called Woolpit, right outside the village. What's kind of crazy about this is that these two kids appeared in a wolf pit in or outside the village of Woolpit. Okay? These two kids that they found in the pit were dressed very strangely. They didn't speak the language, and prepare yourself, they were green. Yes, they were green. So imagine in the Middle Ages, I can't, what blows me away is these kids were not burned at the stake because of the time that they lived in. But in this little village in England named Woolpit, like the material wool, right outside their village in a wolf pit outside of Woolpit, these two kids were found dressed very strangely, not speaking the language, and green. Now, they were brought to the village of Woolpit from the wolf pit. I'm sorry, I can't stop saying that. It's insanity. They're brought to the village where they hide. They immediately run and hide, and they can't get these kids to eat. And then somehow the kids find a stock of dried and raw beans, I should say, and they devour them. Like this is their sustenance. Like, oh, thank God, finally. They didn't eat what was offered to them, but when they found these raw beans, they went bananas. Very, very strange. What's super sad is the young boy died, got sickly and died, passed away. The girl did not. she ended up learning English. And once she did, she was able to tell the people that she came from a land that she called St. Martin, where the sun never shined, but there was a green hue, for lack of a better term. There was a green everything. It was their whole world was bathed in green. She had no idea how she and her brother got to Woolpit, England, that small village in England. The last thing that she remembered was tending cattle with her brother. The next thing she knew, she and her brother were in the wolf pit outside of Woolpit. There, I said it again. And the other crazy thing is this: her skin eventually turned Caucasian. It went from green to I hate the word white because we're not really white; we're skin colored. But they went from green to Caucasian, or she did, which is very weird. So this is one of those stories, like some of the other ones you're going to hear here, like where this traveler comes in from another land, nobody can identify him where he or she is from, and then they bail. Okay, this isn't like that at all. This one, the gal ended up living her life forever in the deal, and so that takes this place right here. This next one's kind of off the wall. And this comes from a number of sources, okay? Not just one folktale, but from a number of sources in this area. Recount a very attractive young woman arriving in Hitachi, Japan in 1803. She was said to have pale skin and red hair, a bit of a ginger, as it were. But that's not the weird thing. She was found by local fishermen in what they called an ominous, which is kind of crazy, hollow metal boat with crystal windows. And they couldn't understand her English, They couldn't understand what language she was speaking. Excuse me. So she wasn't speaking Japanese or any other language that they had been trading with for a bit. They had no idea what she was speaking, and she had a little black box that she was holding on to and that she wouldn't let go. Now, although this was reported by several different sources at the time in 1803. The villagers were so kind of freaked out by this red-haired, pale-skinned woman in a metal boat with crystal windows that they cast her back into the sea. Boat and phone and all. And I kind of have a theory about this one. I think that might have been a cell phone. Weird square box that she wouldn't get rid of. How many people today cling to their phones like the branch on the banks of a raging river? I've lost my phone. I can't function, right? So maybe that was what was going on. Maybe she had a cell phone. I don't know. But she did appear out of seemingly very strange circumstances, right? She arrives in a boat that they had never seen at the time. There were no metal boats in 1803, especially with crystal windows. What the hell was going on there? So in human fashion, they got so freaked out, they cast her back into the ocean, which I thought kind of classic of human beings. Okay, now this next one takes place in 1851, and this was from an article in the British Journal of Athenaeum. And forgive my pronunciations again. I know I've said this in previous shows, but I am radically dyslexic, and frankly, I will butcher anything that gets in front of me. I'll watch a movie of a book that I read, and I go, oh, that's how you pronounce those names. I've been pronouncing them this way my whole life. But I've just kind of adapted and drove on. Anyway, so in this British journal, there's this article that was found about a stranger calling himself Jafar Voren, of all things, right? Jafar Voren. He was found wandering disoriented in a small village near Frankfurt, Germany. He had no idea how he had arrived. Along with speaking broken German, the traveler spoke and wrote in unknown languages he called Laxarian and Abramian. Laxarian and Abramian. And I know I'm pronouncing those two right. Abramian. Go figure. He said he was from the country of Laxaria, in an area of the globe called Scaria, which was separated from Europe by a huge ocean. It almost sounds like the Americas. But according to this guy, it was Laxarian, right? He said the purpose for his traveling was to visit or to find his long-lost brother that he hadn't seen. And his last memory was being shipwrecked along the way. But it's another one of these stories where somebody shows up, right? They don't know the language. They say they're from a certain spot that we call one thing, they call something else. Very, very interesting. And I'll knock out my theory on this, that actually my 13-year-old son, who is Prepped Ghost, he has a gaming channel on here. Check it out. You'll love it. Like, subscribe, comment. Go bananas. This kid needs some support. I'll leave his link down below at the end of the video as well. But again, very strange story. This one is really nutty to me. This is in 1863 in Nova Scotia, right? A guy washed up on the beach of Sandy Cove, missing both legs from a recent amputation. Now, they were very specific to call it an amputation and not like some shark chewed off this guy's legs, that his legs were surgically amputated. Every source on this story says that he did not speak any of the major languages, but he was muttering one thing over and over again, and that was what they believed to be Jerome. So that's what they called this guy, was Jerome. Who knows? He could have been saying, Jerome could mean the devil in his language, and everyone's like, well, if he keeps saying the devil, it must be the devil. And him saying, well, no, not Jerome. Anyway, that's just my take on it. But he was known as Jerome because that was the only thing he could say. The other weird thing is, during this time, just about the time this guy washed up on shores, or a little bit before that, the people that live on the shore saw a ship they could not identify. A ship that was not like any other ship that they had seen before in the days prior to this guy washing up on shore. Now, this guy pretty much lived in near silence the rest of his life. He's not one of these guys that disappeared again. He's one of these guys that stayed the course, as it were. Couldn't find his way back to wherever it is he came from. And never learned the language. Strangely, though, years later, something like 20 years later, these two very well-dressed women found him and pulled him into private, and they were overheard speaking a language that nobody understood, but he was actually conversing after years of being silent, or near silent, and never adjusting to the language of the area. These two women come up and they have a very involved, very almost heated conversation. And when it's over, nobody can find the two women again. But it wasn't, interesting enough, it wasn't Jerome that brought this to people's attention. People were talking about this. Jerome never commented on these two women. So it's not like, oh no, these two women came and they disappeared. Isn't that weird? And they're like, yeah, Jerome, whatever, have another beer. Nothing like that, actually. In fact, he wasn't one that commented on it or had these things going on. And you'll have to excuse me as well. I have quit smoking. And so I am actually vaping right now, but with almost no nicotine in there. Actually, right now I'm at a 6. I want to get down to a 3, and then I'm going to boot it. But I've been a smoker since I was about 19 or 20. I quit for 6 years in there at some point, started up again. Don't, kids, for you kids out there, don't smoke. Don't start at all. It's hell. Give you cancer. Kill you. So forgive me for vaping through this thing. Can you hear that? For those of you in the radio, that was me vaping. Very exciting, I know. So that's the case of Jerome. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about is one that's a little more famous. Picture this, okay? I'm just going to get into the story. A lot of you have heard this. A lot of you may have heard all of these before. I don't know. These were just some of the more off-the-wall ones that I found. But imagine this. It's 1954. If you probably already know it if you're a total geek like me. But it's 1954 in Tokyo, Japan. Hotter than usual. So it's kind of a summer day. We don't know the exact date, to be honest with you. No source I found. Even the papers that reported this particular incident that I'm about to tell you about, and not get wander too far astray before I do, couldn't pinpoint the exact date, or didn't pinpoint the exact date, I should say. But anyway, again, 1954, Tokyo, Japan. A little hotter than usual, but at the Haneda Airport, it's kind of business as usual. Planes are coming, they're going. It's an international airport, so this plane comes from Europe. Everybody's getting off. Everything's fantastic. Excuse me. One more vaping for you. And I'm done. Everything's going normal. Flight comes in from Europe. People are coming off. And then a Caucasian guy with a beard, thank you very much, gets off the plane. And makes his way through customs. He's neatly dressed. Told official he was there on a normal business trip. One of 3 so far this year to Japan, right? His primary language was French, but he also spoke Japanese, German, English, and a few other languages. His wallet had a bunch of different currencies for throughout Europe. France. Let's see. A lot of European countries, Germany, France, England. This is before the euro, of course. This is way before the euro. So when they ask him for his country of origin, he tells them torrid. He says it's between France and Spain. They've never heard of torrid because nobody on planet Earth has ever heard of torrid. But they look at his passport that was supposedly issued, and it says it was issued from this country, torrid. There are stamps from all over Europe. There's 5 stamps from Japan, right? 2 of which were earlier in the year. 2 others were from 5 years ago, were from the last 5 years, which is interesting because the Hanaki Airport, or I'm sorry, I'm butchering the name, Haneda Airport, the Haneda Airport had only been an international airport for 2 years, not 5 years. And yet the stamp was for the last 5 years. God, when they called the company that he was supposed to meet, that he was there on business for, they had no idea who this guy was. They had never heard of his company until the customs people at the airport called them. When they tried to call the company that he said he was from, they found it did not exist, or at least it was not assigned to that number, and that was the only number that he had for it. The bearded man kind of got a little pissed. He kind of scoffed. He thought it was a joke at first. And then he got very angry. So much so that the Japanese, being the amazingly polite culture that they are, got a world map out and showed him that between France and Spain was actually a country called Andorra and not torrid, which made him even more livid. He felt like he was being taken advantage of. Everybody that witnessed this said this guy was out of control. They put him in a hotel. 2 custom agents stayed outside the door. The next morning, he was gone. All right. Now, this was a big deal in Japan at the time, believe it or not, when it finally hit the papers. It was a big deal, but not believed. Not believed by the people, other than the people that were involved in the story. It certainly wasn't believed by the mainstream press, just like it wouldn't be today, sadly. This was a lot harder to fake back in 1954, ladies and gentlemen, than it is now. Now it would be very hard to fake something like this, and you'd probably end up in Guantanamo Bay, to be honest with you. But remember when this was? This was back in 1954. And this was the only story that I was going to do. I was just going to tell this guy's story. Forgive the beep there. I forgot to turn the sound down on my messenger. But when I found all these other stories, I thought, my God, and I'm going to read a couple of the last little bits here. I'll just read this straight out, and then I'm going to tell you one more story. Surprisingly, misplaced travelers such as the businessman from Tord have appeared on many occasions. In 1851, a man was, the one that I just said, claiming to be from Lexeria. Another young man who spoke a completely unrecognizable language was caught stealing a loaf of bread in Paris in 1905. He said he was from Lisbia, which authorities assumed was Lisbon or Lisboa in Portuguese. Yet his language was not Portuguese, and he did not recognize a map of Portugal as his homeland. Now, there's one more story I want to tell that just kind of blew me away. It's about this woman in Seattle, and I can't remember the name or the year. It's driving me crazy, and I couldn't find it anywhere online. But I know it's there, because I even think I saw a blurb on it on YouTube, on somebody else's channel. But basically what the deal was is this woman woke up, and the sheets that she went to bed on were not the same color as when she woke up. In other words, she went to bed with blue sheets, woke up with red sheets. I don't know if those are the actual colors, but that's the basic premise. The sheets were one color when she went to sleep. She woke up and they were another color. There's another bit in her story where the guy that she was married to when she woke up, she'd actually broken up with and was dating somebody else for a couple of years. But she was still with her ex. What she thought was her current boyfriend, and had been for 2 years as far as she was concerned, had no idea what she was talking about. Who is this crazy woman? So this is another recent case. This was, I think, sometime after 2000. So that's another really wild case where the Mandela effect comes into account, right? Where can you imagine that? Just imagine for a second. You go to bed. I go to bed here with my Chihuahua, right? My Chihuahua. Lily is laying with me. I wake up, and it's not a Chihuahua. It's a Beagle. And I'm not in my bed. I'm in a waterbed or whatever. The whole world is the same, but it's just slightly wonky. Can you imagine such a thing? Wild. Absolutely wild. So what's going on with these people? Are these people all just radically mentally ill that wander in occasionally with extravagant paperwork and knowledge of not just other countries, but of their customs? And so is that the case? Or are these, like my son likes to say, do these have to do with the Mandela effect? Now, the Mandela effect roughly goes something like this. During the time that Nelson Mandela was in prison for being a radical and going against apartheid and the South Africa being controlled by 1.5% of the population that happened to be white, and the rest was African, right? So Nelson Mandela, of course, we know, went to prison. Now, there's a whole lot of people, and by a whole lot I mean like tens of thousands of people, that claim that Nelson Mandela died in prison, that remember that vividly. I'm one of them. I remember him dying in prison. And then they ended apartheid, which was the whole gig in South Africa. Mandela was released and became president of South Africa. But tens of thousands of people remember him dying. And that's why they call it the Mandela effect. But there's other instances of this too. There's also Pikachu, of all things, from Pokemon. Now, most people remember Pikachu as having a yellow tail with a black end on it. He's never had a black end on his tail, and he never will. But there's a bunch of people that remember it that way, distinctly, that he had a black end on his tail. Now, that might sound a little weird, but there was another gig of a comedian named Sinbad, right? Back in the late 80s, early 90s. He was kind of a popular guy that was going to do this genie movie, right? I swear I remember this happening. I can see him in the outfit. Now, Shaq did a movie called Kazam or Kazim or whatever, one of the two, during that time period. And I remember Sinbad doing it as almost a bad ripoff of Shaq's horrible movie, to be honest with you. And a lot of people remember those things too. So that's called, because of Joseph, or because of Mandela. It's called the Mandela effect, because so many people remember him dying in prison when, in fact, that he didn't. So my 13-year-old and I kind of believe that that's kind of the deal, that maybe a parallel world, because there's supposed to be an infinite amount of parallel worlds if you buy quantum physics, coexist together, right? Coexist in this time period, or right now, right next to us. Would just take a slight shift in perception to be able to perceive them, right? Is that what's happening with these people? Have they somehow slipped through the cracks? Are they time travelers? If they are, you'd think they'd be a little bit better prepared for the time they're landing in. At least I would. I tend to believe that they're dimension. Just ordinary folks that somehow slipped through the cracks, like in a Twilight Zone episode, to be honest with you. This is the stuff that I find crazy fascinating, and I hope you do too. That's pretty much it on our Travelers episode. I know this one was a little chaotic. We kind of jumped all over the place on this one. Really hope you enjoyed it. Please check out dngnradio.com. The Dungeon Radio. Great stuff happening there. And Prepped Ghost, my youngest son, he's got his own YouTube channel at Prepped Ghost here at YouTube. Please give him a like and subscribe. Both those links will be down there below. Our paranormal group, Where Angels Fear to Tread, also in the notes below. Check us out on Facebook. We don't have a website. Our philosophy is just helping people. We haven't been after proof in a long time, because we believe it, to be honest with you. So if you've got some help, or if you need some help, I should say, please drop me an email. I'll leave my email down here as well. I'm not going to guarantee we'll take the case, but I'll definitely hear you out. And if we believe you, we'll do everything we can to help you out. So that's pretty much it. Have a fantastic day, and keep those heads up, my brothers and sisters.